we have these summer sessions because students are working at companies throughout the state, but they're working in their own role. They're sort of interacting with the people at their own company. But we feel building a professional network for them, for kind of encouraging them to learn from your wisdom, from all the professionals who have created careers in this industry, is a critical part of their growth this summer. So in each session, we cover different skills. Last week, students know we covered networking, and I expect students to put those networking skills to good use today as we go through our program. So thank you, students, for being here. We are going to cover a few critical skills today that are really important for your success in this career, in this field, or any field, really. One of them is sort of building a personal brand and bringing your authentic self to the workplace, which I think we all want to do. And it's really a huge contributor whether we are happy at a company. The other critical skill we'll be talking about today is something that all the professionals who are already working on this call know, is giving and receiving feedback, which is just, can be tricky, even if you've been working for 20 or 30 years. And it's an art that can be learned. And if you do it well, you can have a lot of growth. So we really are going to try and dig into these topics. We have some wonderful speakers. We're going to speak to these particular topics, and then we're going to have exercises where students will practice these skills. Before we get started, I'm going to introduce my colleague, Anna Dow, to talk a little bit about the mentoring part of Project Onramp, which is also a required portion of this internship program. Anna will take just a few minutes to remind students to join our mentoring platform, and then we'll start the program. Anna?
Thanks, Lila. Hi, everyone. My name is Anna Dow. Like Lila said, I was a former Project Onramp intern myself about 2 summers ago, but now I'm back at Life Science Cares in my round as a full-time staff, right? And so really, I just wanted to come on and just really remind you all that this joining the one-to-one platform is a mandatory part of the Project Onramp experience. I know that for me, myself, I definitely had a lot of value from having a mentor. But this part isn't just for us, right? It's really for you and what you're going to gain from it. It is an incredible free opportunity to reach out to industry professionals that you might not already have had an opportunity to talk to before. And personally, my favorite part about this platform is that all of the volunteers on the platform have been vetted by me, right? But they have 100% have said in the past that they are excited to meet with you. So I know for me, I had a lot of anxiety reaching out to volunteers because especially like right out of college or while you're in college, like, do these industry professionals really want to talk to me? The answer is yes. Take all of that fear and anxiety out the window. They want to talk to you, sending out. Yes. Okay. So I'll answer that question. I just got a message in the chat, but I will. Yeah. Okay. Got it. Thanks so much, guys. Yeah, I'll answer that question right after. But yes, just please fill out that form, because next week I will be sending out the magic link. I'll be sending out all the login information. I just wanted to make sure that everyone has signed up for the platform first, so I can do it all in one go. So I hope that answers your question. But yeah, so this is all going to be the first step, right, is to sign on to the platform so that you can start making those connections. But before that, I do need everyone to sign on. After that, next week, I know that there's lots of students that are excited to just jump and start reaching out to volunteers. I have personally been training these volunteers since maybe March, April. They all know that July and August are going to be a very heavy month with all the requests coming in. So don't be shy, just reach out. And again, if this is speed networking, right, of all of these industry professionals on the call can definitely know that every conversation you have is not going to be perfect. That's why you just got to keep trying, right? With Project Onramp, it is a one meeting is required, but to get the most out of the platform, we encourage you to do as many meetings as possible. Really, personally, for me, I think that a minimum of 3 meetings would be the most valuable, and that's how you'll be able to get the most out of it. But I really recommend that you do as many as you can, because not only just that, but a little bit of a carrot, a little to sweeten the pot on the off seasons, not this summer, but outside of the summer, we do gift card giveaways. So that's $50 to $100 gift cards for the winner, the person that logs the most meetings. We're not going to do it this summer because there's so many of you, but we are going to do it after. So if you want to stay on board after, please do. You might get a gift card out of it. But that's all from me. Thank you so much. And I will stay on till the end of the call if you answer any more questions and kind of chat about this a little more. But for then, I will pass the phone or the mic to Ruby.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'm the manager of Project Boston. If we have not met before, I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. Our topic for today is the essential ingredients for success. Last time we talked about networking, mentorship, and effective communication, and I hope that you'll be able to practice those 3 skills that we learned last time today. I believe that in order for you to be successful in your summer internship, it's really important to build your personal brand. Your personal brand is different from your reputation. It's how you want to be perceived by others and how you build your network, how you build your career. And so in order to do that, ask yourself some questions, who are you? What are your values? How do you bring your values to your organization and to your career? And so my hope is that today you'll be able to really begin to articulate your personal brand. And interns, please make sure to ask questions in your breakout rooms. This is such an invaluable time for you to get expert advice and guidance from people who have been in this industry for a very long time. So with that, I would love to introduce our very first speaker, Kathy Jeffery.
Everyone, is Kathy Jeffery. I am the Chief People Officer at Element Science, and I'm so excited to talk to you today about your personal brand. So first off, I just, with a show of emojis or thumbs up, list how many of you know your personal brand and what it is, how that you've already defined it. Okay, so we have a few, but it looks like there's a lot of people here who are in the right place at the right time to learn about your personal brand. So fantastic. So what's really important, I always say, is like defining your personal brand really involves understanding who you are, what you stand for, what sets you apart from your peers, whether it's your skills, your experiences, your personal qualities, the schools that you went to, and how you're perceived by others. So first, but let's take a little bit of a step back and think about when you're looking for a job, because when you're building your brand, it's really the best time to really kind of think about this as you're looking for a job, whether it's an internship or a full-time opportunity. So keep in mind that the top reasons companies hire people are based on likability over skills and experience. And as head of HR, I've seen this time and time again. Somebody might come in and not have exactly all the right skills and experience, but there is this likability quality. That person knew themselves really well. They also were always honest and never lied. So keep that in mind too. The second way that people get the job is finding out what people want and then showing them how they can get them. So what does that mean? You have to know yourself. You have to know what drives you, what motivates you, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and really be able to articulate to whoever it is that's interviewing you that you can do the job that's posted on their website and so forth. So find out what they want and give it to them. So those are 2 things. So keep that in the back of your mind as you think about your brand. All right, so how do you assess where you are? So think of yourself. You have to know yourself first off. And what are you really good at doing? What are your values? In many ways, your brand and elevator pitch is what sets you apart from everybody else. And so really understanding that is such an important part. So you have to define your values, take the time to reflect on your passions, your strengths, and things that guide you. People usually say to me, I don't even know how to begin thinking about my values. We'll get into that in a little bit. But first, understand what really sets you apart and what you want to be known for. Taking time for really that self-reflection and lay the foundation of your personal brand. Sometimes I say the easiest thing you can do is go back and look at pictures of yourself when you were younger. What were you doing? What set you apart from your brother or sister or cousins? Really define what that is. What were some of those essence of who you were and how do you bring that up? The other part is really defining your mission and purpose. And many of you, you're still in college, you might not even know what your purpose is, and that's okay. But know that you are really determined to achieving your mission and purpose and what you want to achieve, and think about, you know, you might be thinking about, I just want to graduate college at this point. I want to get an internship. Well, and think about what your why is. So having a really clear sense of purpose in most cases will give you your brand direction and focus. So really key in that area. So when you think about your dream job and your why, really kind of think about, you know, what makes you get those butterflies in your stomach when you're looking at job postings. Does that excite you? And if so, that's probably the job that you want to go for. And there's something in that. And so kind of reflect on what that could be. The other thing, some of you might have careers heading towards things like engineering or design, marketing, things like that. And if so, you might even be able to create an online presence or a portfolio of some kind. Other things too is when you create your brand strategy, things like volunteer and community reach, if you're going into public policy and things like that, that's also creating your brand. When you think about how are you going to network, you really want to tailor your brand to who you are looking at. What are the companies that you're focused on? And then lastly, as we think about, you know, kind of interviewing techniques and your presentation and your image, how are you showing up, whether it's on a phone call, a video, or an in-person interview? And they can be a variety of different ones at any company. It can be a combination of those. Really think about how are you showing up on that call or video? What does your background look like? What does your voice sound like? Are you tired? Do you have energy? Things like that. And then other things like we'll talk a little bit about how to avoid self-sabotaging yourself. And then also crafting your brand position and your personality and your brand to come forward. All right. So I know that was a lot, but think about, as you think about interviewing, so there's really 3 areas to think about. So there's the competence part, you know, it's demonstrated by your resume. Is your resume detailed? Are there errors in it, or is it completely error-free? You know, list your volunteer work, any extracurricular activities, coursework, also your grades and your GPA. Really important part. So you're demonstrating that. That's a part of your brand. Think also about building relationships. As you start into the world of work, your one job might get you your next job. People, other coworkers that you meet in your internship might go somewhere else and then think of you when they have another job opening in their next organization. But in many cases, when you're interviewing, you really want to think about how are you lowering the threat level and showing employers that things like eye contact and answering their questions directly about who you are really helps lower the threat level. You're less likely to be somebody who they wouldn't want to hire, right? You want to be the person that they want to hire. So answering their questions about strengths and development, the 2 that you should know like the back of your hand, and really about your values and who you are, because many of you don't have probably a lot of internship experience or work experience. So what else do you talk about? You talk about yourself and your values and your why behind coming to that particular company or industry and so forth. And then last but not least, remember how I mentioned earlier, compatibility and likability is the #1 reason people get hired. So I always say, turn the charm up a little bit more in the interview than you normally would. That's when you really kind of show that likability factor. All right, so let's get into how you define your brand. So we talked about values. I mentioned that earlier. Here's a list of some values. There's 40 or so here on this screen, but if you were really to Google or put in ChatGPT, what are some of your known values? There's going to be a whole list of probably hundreds and hundreds of different values that might come up. I pulled these out. I thought these were good ones that I hear people talk about again and again. And so what I suggest that everyone does is that they take this list of values and select 5 to 10 of them. And think about your values as something that is really ingrained in you. It's something that you've had since a very young age. It's something maybe your parents instilled in you, teachers, grandparents, friends, family, you name it. It's really kind of makes you who you are, and they'll be with you for your whole life. Some of them might shift, some might be more important throughout your time, but really they're there. And to discover what some of your values are, I always say do a couple of exercises, kind of look at what words pop out here. But another thing to consider is think about what is one of your biggest pet peeves. And when you think about your pet peeves, so for instance, one of my biggest pet peeves is when people throw garbage out their car window. And to me, that is my pet peeve because they're not having consideration for our environment, for our world. And so when I see that, it makes me really angry. And so I just flip and I said, what my value is consideration for others. So that's a strong value that I have, that I make sure that I'm really responsible. It's connected to my responsibility value of wanting to do more and to help others. So they're all kind of connected in some way, shape, or form. And so think about what those are. And you can even have a chain of like honesty, integrity, and truthfulness. You can have a chain of values that are connected, but really kind of, and then rank them. And then 6 months from now, if you were to pull that list of values up again, you could rank those as well. And think about, are these still my values? And they should be, and they just need to be reordered, or you might find another one. Another way to tell what your value could be is think about any time that you get angry or upset, or any time that you get really happy and excited about something. That means that a value is being honored if you're getting really happy and excited. So I have a value of fun and positivity. So I know that fun and positivity are really key values. So think about what yours are. And then, like I said, if you feel that like a value is being rubbed the wrong way, you get angry about something, that's usually a value too that's being rubbed the wrong way. So what are those? So those are some considerations to think about on values. Any questions on that so far?
My question where it says honesty / integrity / freedom combines concept and thereby loses clarity. What do you mean by loses clarity?
Yeah, so it's not actually where honesty, integrity, and truthfulness, that's a combination that really kind of gives a single distinction. It loses clarity because honesty and integrity are pretty close. But once you put freedom in, how is that related to honesty and integrity? So it loses the purity of it being very clear and a single distinction. Okay,
that means basically the interviewer basically will find a little bit confusing.
Yeah, they might. You might need to explain yourself a little bit more when you think about it. In most cases, I'm not sure if an interviewer might ask you directly, what is your value? Some do, on occasion I do. But they might ask you things like, what are some of your pet peeves? Or they might ask that to understand things like, do they like to be a part of a team? Are they interested in growth? Are they enthusiastic and positive? So they might ask in a different way and not necessarily come out and directly say that, which is why I always say, know your values really well, because you can always connect an example of your value to whatever it is that person is asking about.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. All right, any other questions on values? This is a good one. Take some time and reflect on that. And then, so let's talk about your brand and your elevator pitch. So you don't want to just tell them what you do. You want to highlight how well you can do it and why you're most passionate about it. So a big part of that is, I call it living your brand. So remember that your brand is not just about what you say, it's about how you act and present yourself in every aspect of your life. So consistently embodying your brand values, showing professionalism, delivering on your promises. If somebody gives you something to work on, you get it done. You get it done on time. You do what you say, and you say what you do, I always like to say. And then second, I always think about this when you are at an internship or even working with your professors or in a group class project. Think about, how do you get feedback? Because remember, feedback, which is the next topic that's going to be talked about, is how we evolve and how we learn and grow. So regularly seek feedback from mentors and colleagues, and ask for their perceptions of your brand or areas where you can improve, and use that to really refine and evolve your brand over time. So when you have time, and I'm going to hand out this presentation, and I'm sure Ruby or someone else might distribute it, you should practice your elevator pitch. So when you do that, there's 4 components. Think about who you are and what values you exude. What is your experience to date, your education to date, and your passion that gets you really excited and lights you up? Think about what is your mission and your purpose. And then think about what makes you unique compared to your peers that you can add to your story. Many of you might already have that when you did your college entrance exams, or maybe there's something that really developed over the last couple of years now that you've been in school for a few years. So think about what those are. You really want to tell it in a story, in a very short story. And I always say an elevator pitch is because as long as you're in the elevator, in most cases, it's 60 to 90 seconds. So think elevator pitch is short. Try to include all of those. You can do a sentence for each one of those, pull them all together and tell a story about who you are. Because one of the first questions people usually ask in the interview is, tell us about yourself. And be prepared for that. You should have a long version and have a short version. Really fun, and great way to really kind of demonstrate your brand and talk about that as well. All right.
I will have another question.
Yes.
By any chance, when we're talking about the elevator pitch, do you think it's recommendable to speak, also mention at least something about your drawbacks itself, to kind of like tell them how that will be kind of like including your values, like your honesty, knowing like, oh, I'm all good at this, but hey, I'm a little bad in this situation, but I hope eventually, with working with somebody itself, it progresses.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely tell them a little bit about your experience and really kind of carve out the why behind it and think about that. Why is this important for that job? I always say too, look at the job description. That's your number one key about what they're looking for. And so if they say on their job description, they're looking for somebody who has detail orientation and organizational skills, you want to tell them you're detail oriented and organizational skills if you really have those, if you believe that, right? Now, if you're not very detailed and you know it, then don't lie about that. They'll figure that out. But maybe there's another characteristic on the resume that you're really connected to. So make sure that you make those ties so that they can say, oh, wow, yeah, she has what we need, right? That's an indicator of like what they're looking for. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
You're welcome. Awesome.
Yeah, I have one more question.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Ichiruza.
Hi,
So
Shubham.
when they're asking a question to talk about your weakness and the strength, what are they looking forward to, and how do you say your weakness without like maybe should I say like in a good way, in a positive way?
Yes, I love that you asked that question. It is a very important one. And so what are they looking for? They are looking to understand what one of your weaknesses are. Now, what everyone will tell you, and if you pick up any book, they'll say, how can you show them that you're already aware? So self-awareness is such an important part. So if you say, I don't have a weakness, right then and there, you lost that job. So you want to think about what your weakness is and how aware you are about it and what you're doing about it. So if one of my weaknesses is, and I know this job is saying that they need me to have something like experience in something and I don't have that, I'll be upfront and honest about that. So for instance, for many years early in my career, I remember telling people my weakness was Excel. I wasn't really good at Excel, but that I was learning. And so I took a class and I was doing an online class on how to be better at Excel and do pivot tables and formulas and things like that. Well, that was a good response because it showed that I was taking the initiative to understand, one, that I had a weakness and that I was doing something about it. Does that help?
Yes, thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right, anything else? All right, let's move right on. And so I guess last but not least, it's when you think about your brand and you have to really kind of know what you want, think about your cover letter, resume, your LinkedIn profile. Those are all really key things to know and to ensure that you have really buttoned up really well. That's a big part of who you are, right? It's your calling card. Think about that. So what positions, what responsibilities, salary requirements, and things like that are things that you should know, like the back of your hand going into any type of interview, and how your values and talents support what you do, and especially the characteristics that make you who you are today. And then lastly, when I think of, I don't know if everyone can see this or not, let me make sure that. No.
Yep, we can see it.
Okay. So seek, when you think about your brand and how are you starting your career, that first internship role is really important because it's going to lead you to your next one and so forth. So as you seek different internships and relevant experiences, that's going to contribute to your brand as well. And then how do you go about showcasing your expertise? There's many people, and especially later in their career, they start doing things like writing blogs or perhaps sharing information on LinkedIn, things that really inspire them or motivate them. That's also adding to your brand. I also say go back to your own social media and make sure that when you look at your social media, that anything that you see on social media that you've posted, you want your employer to see, and you don't mind that they see those things about you because they can see them. So make sure that as you showcase your expertise, you're also thinking about your brand from a personal perspective. And then when you think also about how can you leverage any college resources, so joining courses like this and participating in the mentor program that was mentioned earlier, that's really key. Helping to build your professional reputation, what that looks like. Different types of organizations and things like that might be affiliated with the industry that you're going into. For instance, MedTech Women, if you're interested in MedTech. And also remember seeking feedback and learning from it. And above all else, stay current and adaptable. Even after you finish your degree, keep learning, reading, and so forth. And then lastly, just to highlight how I connected my values with my brand. There's 3 areas. There's connectedness and inclusivity, which is part of my values, education and creative thinking, and then lastly, helping others. And so if anybody were to say, who's Kathy Jeffery, I hope that they would talk about these 3 things, and at least people in my network that I know this about me. So, and then lastly, here's a checklist. for you to use and to think about going forward. And that's it. Any final questions? I know it was a lot.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Students will get a chance to practice some
Oh, great.
really talk about, we're going to go into breakout rooms, so students will really get a chance to kind of, do an exercise where they're sort of talking through with the volunteers in their breakout room. Ruby, do you want to kind of give brief instructions and we can have the breakout room start?
Definitely. So we are going to go into our first breakout room session. The exercise is to choose 3 words that define you. Be prepared to share your words and then talk about why you chose them. So everyone in the room, I hope you will make a brief introduction. And if the volunteer could first make your introduction, talk about your own personal brand, share your 3 words, and then each student in the group can also share. So we will be in breakout rooms for 15 minutes, and then we will come back into the room and move forward with our next speaker. So Eric, if you could move us all into our rooms, that'd be great. All right, so I'm going to get started. So our second topic is the importance of giving and receiving feedback. I think on the intern side, receiving feedback might be a little bit more concerning. I know that sometimes people might think, oh, it's going to be bad. I'm going to get criticized. I don't think that's always the case. I think that if you have a more neutral stance on receiving feedback, it's really an opportunity for you to listen to someone else who wants to help you improve your performance. And I also think it's important to listen to feedback so that you can improve, what it is that you need to work on. We all have areas that we could always strengthen. And it also, I think, helps to motivate you to really think about what your goals are, right? And in terms of giving feedback, more traditionally from the supervisor side, it's really important that the supervisor communicate what their needs are, what kind of work needs to be done, how it needs to be done. And this really all goes back into what is effective communication, which is a key skill that you should be practicing every single day during your internship. I also want to encourage you to kind of flip that model, right? And that the intern, you should also be providing feedback to your supervisor. What is your preferred method of communication? Is it verbal? Is it written? What are your needs? And you should be able to give feedback to your supervisor. And again, the supervisor should be able to receive that feedback so that you can better mentor your intern. So with that being said, I would love to introduce our next speaker. Rebecca is a highly seasoned professional in human resources and employee engagement and culture. So Rebecca, I will hand it off to you.
Okay, great. Hello, everyone. It was great to be in that breakout session and get to meet a few of you. I'm a huge supporter of the Project Onramp program, and I think these are super valuable and effective skills and sessions to help kind of launch you. So I'm excited to be able to share a little bit about giving and receiving feedback, which is a topic that I love and talk about a lot at RevMed. So my job is a Senior Director, Employee Engagement and Culture at Revolution Medicines. And there I do a lot of learning and development and trainings on topics like this. So I'm excited to dive in. So this is probably maybe how some of you feel if someone says to you, can I give you some feedback? And I'll ask for this to be interactive. So maybe just throw out a plus, a thumbs up if you've had this reaction if you've ever felt this when someone mentions the word feedback. All right, I'm seeing some. Yep. And if you can drop into the chat, what is it that, just as I'd love to get a couple of answers at least in here. What is it that you're thinking when someone says, can I give you some feedback? What are the beliefs, the fears, the myths about feedback that come up that make people cringe? So I messed up, I'm doing something wrong. I'm usually excited because I want to improve. Great, that's a good one. We'll hopefully get everyone there. You're worrying that you failed someone. Yeah, that's the big thing, right? It's the assumption that you've done something wrong. So I'm going to throw out some myths about feedback that are really common. that constructive feedback means you're not doing a good job. So that's obviously one that's come up in the chat. Another myth is that people don't care or can't change. So what's the point? That's a big reason that people often don't give feedback, is they're like, what's the point? That feedback is a waste of time, that we're too busy to give feedback. That one comes up a lot in really busy organizations. The feeling is that it takes a lot of time. One thing I'll call out is that I think feedback done well is never a waste of time, but feedback given poorly often can be a waste of time, or it can create more churn and more slow down you and your organization and your projects. So that's why giving feedback effectively is so important, which is what we're talking about today. Another myth is that feedback upsets and demotivates people. I think this is a really big one, because oftentimes we can be really hesitant to give feedback, but actually the people we're working with really want feedback, and it might make them feel like you support them and value them. That's especially true for managers who, when they're working with team members, often feel hesitant to give feedback, but then they find out later that the team member has been wanting feedback this whole time. And the last one on here that we'll talk about is, this is actually a myth that positive feedback is always motivating. Positive feedback is often motivating, but we'll talk about how we can actually frame positive feedback so that it gets what we want out of it. So when we think about giving and receiving feedback, I think the first place to start, because we just talked about all these ways in which feedback has sort of a bad reputation or can spark reactions that are counterproductive in those we're working with and in ourselves. So we have to start by resetting our mindset around feedback. And I'm suggesting we use a growth mindset approach. And growth mindset, I think you've heard about in past sessions. It's the idea that we are all able to change, that we're able to grow and build new skills. Opposite of a stagnant mindset, which says sort of you are who you are and you're stuck in place. And I think we all believe in a growth mindset, but I want to show kind of how it plays out with feedback. So the first piece to believe and sort of try to, ensure that you really embedded in your mindset is that we each want to do good work and contribute to our company's goals and mission. So that's a foundation, is you sort of have to believe in the positive intent of those you're working with, that they all want to help this project go through to completion, or they want the company to be successful. They want you to be successful. So that's the first part. The next belief that we all have to kind of think about and instill is the belief that we are each limited in the perspectives and experiences that we have. So that means both you are limited and whoever you're working with is limited. And I want to call out that this applies to absolutely everyone in an organization. The brand new hire who just joined is obviously very limited in their knowledge of the organization, but the thing that they really know is what the orientation process is like and how it feels to be a new hire at the company. They're an expert at that. The CEO of that company knows a lot more about the company, but they don't really have a very good perspective probably on what the current orientation program is like. So that's just an example of how really being aware at all times of how limited we are in our perspectives is important. And when we're able to believe those two things, when we believe that we all want to contribute and that we're limited in our perspectives, then it feels natural to assume that feedback is a critical tool that we have to use to overcome these limitations. So when we have this mindset, what happens? What are we able to do in terms of how we will give feedback when we approach it from this framework? And that's what we're going to talk about next. So the first is, if we have the mindset that we each want to do good work in support of our mission, what happens? And I'll say the first thing is we assume positive intent, right? So we are able to assume that those giving us feedback, that the people we're giving feedback to, that they were trying to do their best, right? That they wanted to contribute to the company. So that means when you're giving feedback, you're going to be more likely to notice the positive contributions. You'll notice what they were doing that was impactful to the organization, and you're more likely to share that. If you go into giving feedback thinking that someone just didn't care or just didn't try, you're not going to notice those positive things. And it's really going to reduce the amount that the person is able to feel comfortable absorbing the feedback you're giving. In addition, if you assume that the person wants to do good for the organization, then you'll assume that they need more information on how to do that. So again, like let's say you'd assume someone just wasn't trying, then telling them, hey, try might seem like good enough feedback. But if you assume, no, they were trying, they just need more information, then you're going to take it further. You're going to suggest actions, provide tools, think about what more they might need to know to do better next time. Those things will come naturally if you're coming from that mindset that we're all trying to do good work. And the next part of this is what happens if you're receiving feedback. If you're coming from this mindset that we are all trying to do good work, then when you're receiving feedback, you know that there is that assumption of that positive intent, both for you, from your manager, that they know that you are trying to do good work, but also for them, that by trying to give you feedback, they're trying to support you in your growth. And I'll call out that really when you receive feedback from this approach, when you receive feedback, really feeling grateful for it and knowing that the intention of the person giving the feedback is positive, then that can create, sorry, I'm hearing a very loud sound that just started in the background. So I hope that's not too disturbing to others and just me. But when you do recognize that the person giving you feedback is intending to support you, then that can create a real positive feedback loop because you can receive it well, show real gratitude for the feedback. And when you show gratitude for feedback, that's what gets the cycle going. And then the person will give you feedback more frequently. Any questions on these ideas for giving and receiving feedback? And feel free to drop questions in the chat as well.
Yes, I
Rebecca?
have a question.
Yeah.
So when you want to receive the feedback, like when you want to have that conversation with your manager, whom should you expect to start? Is it your manager, or you should bring out, and how would you bring it up, the conversation?
Are you saying who should you have the conversation with, your manager or someone else, or did I miss it? Oh, great question. So I think really always trying to have the conversation directly, if you can, is a good place to start. And that can be difficult. And a really good way to use your manager is to ask for guidance on how you might have that conversation. So if it's a conversation with another coworker and you're not sure how to have it, if you are comfortable and you feel like you can use the tips we'll go through here to have that conversation, it's great to try doing that individually first, to start building your own comfort and creating strong relationships with those you're working with. But if you're feeling really stuck, then going to your manager and saying, hey, here's where I'm feeling stuck with this person. Here's what I'm thinking of saying. Can you help me? That's a great way to use your manager to support you. But it's really good to go from the mindset of, I know this person and I have similar desires for our team, right? Bring that positive intent to your manager and make sure your manager knows your intention is to work on giving the feedback directly versus saying, I'm just here to complain about this person, because that doesn't show kind of a lot of willingness to engage in helping to build that strong relationship. Does that answer the question? Cool. So I know I'm almost out of time, so I'm going to go quickly here. The second piece is that we're limited in our perspectives and experiences, right? When we went through that mindset process. So if we recognize that we're limited in our mind and our perspective and experiences, then we become curious. And I'd say curiosity is like one of the biggest flashing light words that I use with giving and receiving feedback. And it's on both sides of it. The more curious you are when you are giving feedback, the more likely the person will be to receive it well. The more curious when you're receiving feedback, the more likely you are to learn what you need to learn to be able to actually get something valuable out of that feedback. So this is a visual that I find really helpful. The idea is if you give feedback as if there's a wall between you and the person and you are throwing feedback like a package over the wall, that feedback is going to hit like a ton of bricks, right? It's going to hurt. So what you want to do instead is go to the other side of the wall and give feedback as a conversation. So making sure you recognize that you are limited in how much you know about this situation. Even if you're much more senior, even if you're the manager, you still only know your one perspective. So make sure when you're giving feedback, you're asking questions. You're seeking information about the experience of the person, what's going on their side of the fence that might be resulting in whatever behavior or situation you're seeing. And then similarly, you're sharing information about your perspective, recognizing that just like you're limited in what you know, they're limited in what they know about you. So sharing your perspective, what's the impact of their behaviors for you? So I'm going to give one example here. Oh, actually, this is not the example. These are kind of the quick tips. We've gone through some of these, but this is a good sheet you could print out and use for yourself in the future. So the first tip is to make sure you're very behavioral and specific, not using general terms when you're giving feedback. So we have a bunch of examples in the deck you can look at later on how to get really specific in your language. So you won't use general terms like poor communicator, not a team player. Those aren't super helpful. You'll also be factual and not interpretive. So that means not making assumptions about why a behavior is showing up. So if you say something like, so-and-so seems to be late on projects because they are taking on too much work. You've made an assumption unless you've really talked to them about that. So sticking to the facts you have and not interpreting the why helps to avoid someone shutting down because your interpretation was wrong. It should be linked to the impact. This is super important because sometimes it seems obvious, the impact. Let's say you've been late on 3 projects. They might not recognize what that's doing for the broader organization. They might think it seems like lots of people are delayed on projects. It seems like we're always changing the timelines. So making sure you explain what's the impact on the team of that action you're seeing. And lastly, we've mentioned this, it should include actionable and future focused guidance. So making sure you're framing the feedback on what you want more of. So here's an example. If you say, Sarah isn't a great communicator and doesn't help me feel confident on my projects. This could be feedback you're giving to your manager in your internship. This is not very helpful, right? If isn't a great communicator doesn't give much information. Here's an example of that feedback with a lot more detail. Sarah, I really appreciate that you're giving me projects that are challenging and give me the opportunity to learn. For the recent projects on expense tracking, your email summarizing the request was very high level, and it wasn't clear on the format or the structure of the final product. I also wasn't sure if you wanted me to get started right away, or if this was a project I would work on down the road. I often feel nervous sending follow-up emails with questions as I know you're busy and sometimes things are missed. In the future, if we could plan to discuss new projects in our one-on-one, that would be really helpful for me to ask follow-up questions and get the context from you. So you can see how much more helpful that second feedback is from the first. And I know we're pretty much at time, so I'm just going to share briefly a couple highlights from these slides and you can come back to them. But this is a format that you can use that leverages kind of everything on the prior slides. It starts with championing. So championing and finding out what is a real thing that you appreciate about the person as it relates to this topic. Then being really specific about the behaviors that you're seeing that are maybe problematic or that you'd like to see an adjustment in, being clear about the impact, and then ending with the action. And you can see in here how the feedback that I just shared sort of uses this structure. This is another example, but I'll leave it for you to review later. And then I'll just say one point on positive feedback. All of this applies to positive feedback as well. So if you are giving feedback to a team member and you say, Juan is a great team member and I love working with him, that's really nice, but it doesn't give Juan a lot to work on or a lot to understand about himself and what is working. So giving positive feedback that is specific as well makes it much more impactful and memorable to the individual. So saying Juan shows commitment to the team by being focused in our team meetings and speaking up when he has a different perspective. I really appreciate hearing his input and it encourages me to speak up too. That's the type of feedback that is going to last for that person, right? It's going to help them understand themselves, maybe help them see their values. So thinking about how you can actually integrate this into the positive feedback you're giving as well. So I think that's it with these key things. There's a little bit more in the appendix slides that you can check out. But I will pass it back to Ruby for an opportunity for us to go into a breakout session. And I think I would suggest maybe just sharing if there's anything that either surprised you or anything questions you have coming out of this. That could be something you bring into your breakout. And if you have a chance to do some practice, we have an example scenario here, which is that you are wanting to tell a team member you're in meetings with that their tone in the meetings isn't helpful for you. So the example here is you're working with a colleague who's often has a very rushed tone and they're pushing through on the agenda really quickly, and it doesn't give you the feeling that you're able to speak up in the meeting. How might you frame feedback to them using this, this model? That's also something you can practice afterwards if you don't have time in the breakouts. But thanks all for listening, and I hope that this gives you some new things to think about with giving and receiving feedback.
Okay, thank you so much, Rebecca. So we will not have 15 minutes for the breakout rooms. We're only going to have about maybe 5 or 6 minutes. So for the second exercise, how do you give feedback? How do you receive feedback? And then try role-playing a situation between an intern and a supervisor and practice just what Rebecca said. So Eric, if we could place everyone in breakout rooms, I will give a countdown for 6 minutes.